What's up YouTube and welcome to a new video. Now if you clicked on this video, you're probably aware that the 996 Turbo went up drastically in value over the last few years. But did prices overshoot and what are the current depreciation rates? Now stick around till the end of the video because that is exactly what I'm going to show you. If you're by the way more interested in the Porsche 997, then I strongly recommend that you check out the video for which the link is appearing above here, as I do a full depreciation analysis for that car over there. Now let's continue with the 996 Turbo, and as always the analysis is divided in a few simple steps. Now in step number 1 we're going to figure out the current price ranges for the 996 Turbo. In step number 2 you smash that like button if you didn't already do so. In step number 3 we'll figure out the depreciation per year, and in step number 4 we'll figure out the depreciation per 1000 kilometers driven. Now to get the full market picture, the analysis is split between the coupes, convertible, manual, automatic, turbo and turbo S cars. Now let's start by having a look to the price ranges for the 996 Turbo and by having a look to the full market, so all the cars which are currently available for sale. That is shown on the graph which is popping up now on the screen. You can see that in the top graph we have a histogram with price on the horizontal axis and the number of cars available for that given price point on the vertical axis. On the graph at the bottom of the screen you can see the same information but now indicated by a line, which will be useful later on when we start to compare different models. For now let's focus on the top graph. We can see first of all that there are 64 cars for sale and that the average price point, which is indicated by the dotted line going through the graph, is 65,000 euros. You can however also see that prices start just below 40,000 euros and that they stretch up all the way till 130,000 euros. Now I had to remove one car from the analysis, and that was this car over here, which was priced at an incredibly high 280,000 euros. Now this car is in a mint condition and the advertiser even says that the car will undergo a 111 point check at the Porsche dealer before you buy the car, as they state, and excuse my German here, Vor Auslieferung wird nochmal eine Wartung und ein 111 Punkte Check auf unsere Kosten bei Porsche durchgeführt. Now that sounds like an excellent service, but I had to remove this car from the analysis because it would skew all the results. Now let's start to make some interesting comparison, and we will start by comparing the automatic cars to the manual cars. That's shown in the graph over here. The manual cars are displayed in orange and the automatic cars are displayed in blue, and we can see that there are about as many manual as automatic cars for sale. What is however more interesting is that you can see very clearly from the graph that you pay a premium of about 10,000 euros for a manual car over an automatic car, as you can see that the average price point for a manual is about 10,000 euros higher than for an automatic car. Now we can see that the bottom of the market is more or less the same for the automatic and the manual cars, but that the top end of the market lays a lot higher for the manual cars than for the automatic cars. This is also explaining why the manual cars are on average a lot more expensive than the automatic cars. Let's continue now with the comparison between the convertibles and the coupes, which is popping up now on your screen. The coupes are displayed in blue and the convertibles in orange, and you can see that the coupes are by far the most popular ones, as there are 48 cars for sale, whereas there are only 18 convertibles for sale. You can also see that the convertible is on average 8,000 euros more expensive than the coupe, and the main reason for this is of course that the convertibles are all newer cars, as the convertible was introduced at a later point compared to the coupe. If we move on to the last comparison for the price ranges, the Turbo versus the Turbo S, we can see that there are many more turbos for sale than Turbo S's. Out of the total cars for sale, 58 cars are turbos and only 8 are Turbo S's. Also the average price point is significantly different. The Turbo has an average price point of about 64,000 euros, whereas the Turbo S has an average price point of 76,000 euros. We now have a good understanding of the market, so let's move on to the depreciation per year, which is popping up in the graph over here. On the horizontal axis we have year, and on the vertical axis we have price. Each of the blue bubbles which you see represents a car for sale, and the blue line shows the average depreciation per year. You also see axes throughout the graph, and these axes show the average price point for that specific model year. Now you can see immediately that the depreciation curve is extremely flat for the 996. In fact, the average depreciation per year is only around 1000 euros. This is of course something which is not so strange, given the fact that the prices went up already significantly over the last few years. If we however have a closer look to the graph, we can see an interesting split in prices. If we look to the average price point per model year, we can see that this on average lays between 55 and 70,000 euros. There is however a significant gap between the cars which fluctuate around the average price point per model year and the cars which are priced over that average price point. Now if we differentiate in the graph between the manual and the automatic cars, we find at least partially a good explanation for this difference in price point. Over here we have now the exact same graph, but the manual cars are now displayed in orange and the automatic cars are now displayed in blue. Now we can see three interesting things for this graph. Number one, we can see that the average price point per model year for a manual car is significantly higher than the average price point of an automatic car for that given model year. Number two, we can see that the depreciation curve for the manual cars is actually going up and that the manual cars are appreciating at a value of 1,700 euros per year, whereas the automatic cars are on average depreciating with a rate of 3,500 euros per year. And number three, we can see that all of the cars which were priced significantly above the average market value are manual cars. Now this large difference between the average price point and the highest price point is actually quite typical for cars which are going up in value. You can observe from most of these markets that cars which are in mint condition and have the exact right specifications are priced with a significant premium over cars which don't meet those criteria. If we then move on to the difference in depreciation between the coupe and the convertible, we end up with the graph over here. The coupe is displayed in orange and the convertible is displayed in blue. You can see that the depreciation curves are not that different from each other. And we can see that the depreciation curve for the convertible is almost flat, as the depreciation per year sits at 238 euros, whereas we can see that the depreciation curve for the coupe is actually going up, indicating that the coupe goes up at around 1,700 euros per year. And if we also have a quick look to the difference in depreciation per year for the turbo and the turbo S cars, we end up with the graph over here, where we have the turbo S cars in orange and the turbo cars in blue. Now we can see that the turbo S is still going down in value at a rate of 6,000 euros per year, whereas the turbo is going up in value at a rate of 500 euros per year. Important disclaimer, there are so little observations for the turbo S cars that one can question how reliable this depreciation number is. Let's move on now to the next and the final step before we conclude on the question as to whether it's still a good idea to buy a 996 turbo and whether the cars are overvalued or not. This last step is to figure out the depreciation per 1,000 kilometers driven, and the graph for that is popping up over here on your screen. On the horizontal axis we have the kilometers driven, and on the vertical axis we have the price. Now you can see that most of the cars have between 50 and 100,000 kilometers driven, and that there's one car which has about 250,000 kilometers driven. Now the average depreciation per 1,000 kilometers driven is in fact not that high, as it sits at 166 euros. But let's see again what happens if we split the graph between the automatic and the manual cars. Now that is shown in the graph over here, where we have in orange the manual cars and in blue the automatic cars. We can see that the average depreciation per 1,000 kilometers driven for the automatic car sits at around 130 euros, where it sits at around 260 euros for the manual cars. What is however extremely interesting from this graph is to see how the low mileage manual cars are priced. We can see now namely that the fact that it's a manual car and has low mileage doesn't necessarily mean that it should be priced so high. In fact, there are only a few manuals with low mileage which are priced significantly above the market average. I actually digged a little bit deeper in those cars, but I couldn't find an apparent reason as to why they should be priced so much above the average market price. Now let's also have a quick look to the differences in depreciation per 1,000 kilometers driven for the coupe, convertible, the turbo and the turbo S cars. We will start with the coupe and the convertible. That is shown in the plot over here, and the coupes are displayed in orange and the convertibles are displayed in blue. Now the depreciation curve for the coupe is of course less steep than the depreciation curve for the convertible. The reason for this is that there are more old cars included in the analysis for the coupe. In fact, the depreciation rate for the coupe sits at around 140 euros, where it sits at around 300 euros per 1,000 kilometers driven for the convertible. Besides that, I think it's interesting to see that all the cars which are priced significantly above the market average with low mileage are coupes. Moving on then to the difference between the turbo and the turbo S, we can see in the graph over here that the depreciation per 1,000 kilometers driven doesn't differ significantly. The turbo S depreciates at a rate of around 260 euros per 1,000 kilometers driven, and the turbo depreciates at a rate of on average 160 euros per 1,000 kilometers driven. Now taking all of these observations into account, we can draw a few interesting conclusions and answer the question as to whether the 996 turbo market is indeed overvalued. Number 1, we could see that the market for a 996 turbo definitely shows the characteristics of a car market which has been increasing in value on average. Now there are a few reasons for this. First, we could see that year didn't have a significant effect on price anymore, as the depreciation curve per year was almost completely flat. In fact, there were other aspects of the car which had a bigger influence on the price than year. Second, we could see a huge variation going on in prices, as prices range from 40 all the way up to 280,000 euros for a 996 Turbo. And this is something which is very typical for a car market which is going up in value. Now, conclusion number 2. We can say that the market is definitely valued towards the high side, but that not all of the cars are per definition overvalued. However, the cars which are priced at a significant premium over the average price point, they are definitely overvalued. I would therefore definitely steer away from getting into a 996 Turbo which is overvalued, meaning 996 Turbo starting from a price point of around 85,000 euros. By getting into a 996 Turbo at that price point, you expose yourself to a lot of downside risk as prices might drop in the future. Besides that, I think that there are 996 Turbos for sale which offer significantly better value for money. Now, the 996 remains an amazing car, and if you still want one, but not an overvalued one, which one should you go for? Personally, I would be looking towards a manual and a coupe around the average market price point. As you can see from the graph, a lot of cars meet that criteria, but not all of them might be necessarily in the best spec available. Many manual coupes around that price point either have some sort of body kit on them, are tuned, or are import cars. However, I found a few manual coupes around that price point which have the same spec as the cars which are overvalued and, judging by the pictures, are in the exact same condition. Now, this might mean that you need to search a little bit longer to find your perfect 996 Turbo, but that your patience will be rewarded by avoiding buying an overvalued car. That was again the depreciation analysis for a 996 Turbo. If you are, however, considering to buying a 996 Turbo, you might also want to consider a Porsche GT4, as prices are now at about the same level. You can check out the depreciation analysis for the GT4 over here, and if Italian cars are more your thing, you can check out the depreciation analysis for the Alfa Romeo 4C over here. As always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and to hit the like button if you liked the video. See you next time.